Less than 2 weeks away from Selection Sunday. Happy conference tournament week to those who celebrate, and welcome in for another just tremendous episode of Six Rotations. We're so happy that you're with us. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. We're brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, last week was another great week of women's college volleyball. We had a really fun start to the week. We had topsy-turviness throughout the middle, reverse sweeps, and then Stanford held two tremendous matches where they beat Pitt and then lost to SMU. So much parity in the top 10, 15 again. Which of the matches really stood out to you this week?
Well, I liked that triumvirate of SMU, Pitt, and Stanford going at each other. I thought that was a really interesting synopsis of the ACC, and I did enjoy Louisville's match also. I thought Louisville got behind 2-0 to a phenomenal effort by the youngster
Miami.
from Miami, and she had 24 kills in the first two sets, but they used her too much, and she ended up with 19 errors in that match, and that's why they lost actually. Louisville came back and just stormed back and seemed to take that over. But that means the ACC, in my opinion, has four top 10 teams.
Yeah.
They're the only conference with four top 10 teams, and boy, they play hard. Peyton Peterson was really good for them. They've been looking for somebody to score. Chacoin's not their scorer, and she gets hot when they're good, but when they're not, they need somebody. And Peterson is starting to step up and do a great job. And if they can count on her, then they've got a go-to. But everybody's got to have a go-to now. If you don't have a go-to, you're in trouble.
So here are some of the other top storylines. Nebraska's unbeaten streak of sets won ends at 48 as UCLA was able to nab one in front of over 10,000 fans in Pauley Pavilion. But Rebecca Alec was perfect. She had a boatload of blocks. We'll talk more about that. Andy Jackson also had no errors in that one, hit over 600, and then a sweep at USC keeps Nebraska unbeaten. Kentucky snagged a share of the SEC title with a wild five-set thriller against Oklahoma. Texas had that reverse sweep over Auburn, so we'll see the two of them kind of leading the way on Sunday on SEC Network to kickstart the quarterfinals of the SEC tournament. And how about our darlings in the Big 12? We're going to show you the rankings in a little bit, but 20 through 25 is dominated by Big 12 teams as Iowa State stays unbeaten at home, beating TCU. Colorado beat TCU, fell in 5 sets to Arizona State, and Utah reverse swept BYU. It was a chaotic week in the Big 12 conference. Purdue in the Big 10, their fifth set streak came to a close as Oregon got some revenge from that 2020 spring 2021 tournament when Purdue beat them in the Sweet 16. Meanwhile, Minnesota swept Penn State, who struggled with Ohio State in 5. Might the Nittany Lions be on the real bubble now? Not just hosting, but the tournament bubble as they continue to struggle. And Mick, upcoming this week, we've got Purdue, Wisconsin, we've got Kansas, BYU, and Nebraska, Iowa on Thursday on FS1, and then Nebraska at Indiana on Sunday. What's most tantalizing?
Well, you know who's been playing up is Iowa. They played, I think, five set matches now in the last 3 weeks, and they are playing as good as they've played in 10, 15 years. That probably is a team that's now found a groove and they're playing well. You don't really want to play them. Now, Nebraska is not going to lose to them. Let's get that straight. But they can hurt Nebraska a little bit, and I think Nebraska really could use a scare. They could use have to get in a 5 game match and have to think about themselves a little bit one time. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're okay. I do think though that the Kansas BYU match could put BYU out of the tournament. They're 10th in the conference. Think about that. BYU 10th in the Big 12 right now. That's just amazing to me, and that shows you what's happening in the Big 12. Some of these other matches are middle of the top 25 matches, could they hurt somebody from getting a first round hosting? Or could, for instance, BYU upsets Kansas, then what happens to Kansas? They look like they're pretty solid to get a top 16 bid, but they're in that last five. So anybody in that last five is in jeopardy if things go topsy-turvy. And Wisconsin has to continue to play well. Um, there's only one real Big Ten team in the top 10. And Wisconsin's either 10 or 11 on most everybody's scale, but they've got to start beating some people now.
Well, let's go ahead and look at our top 10 as we did have a bit of a shuffle with Purdue losing to Oregon, dropping out, replaced by Wisconsin, who moves up one spot. SMU jumps from 10 to 8 with their win at Stanford. And maybe most notably, Texas retakes a spot over Pitt with the Panthers dropping in 5 sets at Stanford. Tough environment. Tremendous outing from Julia Blishov or Shaw.
Blayshov.
Blyshop,
Blayshov.
she had 20 kills, including the match winner, 16-14 in that fifth set. But Mick, I want to dive into our number one overall seed. And I think we're at a point now where I don't think there's anything Nebraska is going to do that's going to remove them from that number one overall spot come Sunday at the end of this month. They hit 412, Mick, against USC in front of 9,000 fans at the Galen Center on Sunday. And Mick, three different Huskers had 10 kills. They all were efficient with Murray, Adriano, and Landfair. Their middles were electric with 17 kills and one error. I just want to give some due because that was a tough trip, right? You lose a set at UCLA, bounce back at USC, and they made the Trojans look poor.
Yeah, the Trojans did not play well. They seemed to be out of their element there until the third set. And they had a big crowd, and that tells me they're not ready for prime time. I mean, they needed to challenge. They're on their home floor. It's late in the season. Why not have fun with it? It's nothing to lose. All they have to do is go for it. And they seem like they couldn't get their feet under them. Yet they've got two freshmen out there in the lineup, maybe three at times. So they're just that's a good way to get your feet wet and start. But that puts them really on a bubble to be the 16th team hosting.
Yep.
And they have to do something in this next week to convince people that they're ahead of Indiana, that they're ahead of a couple of these other teams to get a hosting spot.
And then we talked about it before Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern on FS1, Nebraska, Iowa. And you had that point, Mick. They took Minnesota to 5 sets this past Sunday. They took Indiana to 5 sets the previous week on Friday in Bloomington. So these are showings from Iowa that are impressive. And the question is, will they show up? And you talk about USC, they've got Oregon on Wednesday this week. That could be a big test on the road, and then Illinois. But to finish the year, USC doesn't have much competition. They got Michigan and Michigan State. So no more ranked foes for USC. They could find themselves kind of backing their way in and geographically advantaged to that top 16 spot. But Mick, I
Well,
want to show
they can't slip. They cannot slip.
correct. Yeah,
That's
must-win
a terrible way to go into the end of the season. That doesn't matter if you win, but you can't afford to lose. So I hated that when I was coaching. That's the worst way. And I was going to say about Nebraska, I'd like to see one night when they can't pass, because that's
Does it
when
happen? That's the question. Yeah.
well, that's interesting. They keep changing their libero. They keep going Showboy, then they come back with the freshman, and then they come back with Showboy, and I don't know if that shakes the confidence or if that gives both of them a chance to be really good. I don't know how that works, but I do know that the middles won't be effective if they can't pass. And they'll have to force the middle, and that gives people a chance to load up on the outsides, and then we'll see what they really have.
All right, Mick, how much of that late night Pitt Stanford match were you able to consume?
All of
And
it.
okay, talk me through it. I was working, so I did not get to watch much of that.
Yeah, I thought uh, SMU came out really playing well. Then I thought, well, it's going to be 3-1 Stanford, and SMU slipped a little bit. They became a little bit out of system in the second set, and then all at once, Malaya Jones just started making a difference out there. And then the kid that got hurt on the left side, I'm sorry, her name slips my mind. I think it's Rogers. Rogers beat a
Yep.
ball off.
Kennedy Rogers. Yep.
Yeah, she beat a ball off of the setter's head in the second set that took her out of the match. Stanford comes with their other setter. Kevin's interviewed at halftime, says, "No worry, we work all the time with both setters. We'll be fine." Didn't seem to have the same rhythm for the rest of the match, and even with the middles getting an abnormal number of sets, the left sides and the opposite Harvey could not keep control of that match for Stanford. And I was amazed. I thought Stanford's defense was not as good as SMU's. If you watched SMU's middle backs, they were in position almost every time for Stanford's attack. And I thought they either know something or they're just really good at reading the situation. So I think SMU's for real. I don't have SMU at 8. I have them up higher. I think that triumvirate actually, the four of those ACC teams are right there on 3, 4, 5, and 6 in my book, and I don't know who's going to displace them. They're all playing that well, but they've all got injuries. And so, what happens if they all get healthy? Watch out for the rest of the people. Pittsburgh still got Morowitz out. They played a new kid against Cal on the left side. Grigori, I think it was 20 out of 29 swings for kills, no errors for her. Um, Livings is just coming back for SMU. She played, unfortunately, got aced 5 times, but she played in the back row, and she will be back. But Rogers sprained her ankle, so she's out. So we don't know what SMU's lineup's going to look like. Um, and still, Louisville can't score, and they still win. It's amazing to me. Peyton really coming in there and doing a good job. Peyton Peterson doing a good job to carry them this weekend. So it's going to be really interesting, and that's leaving Miami out. That's leaving them fifth, and they always have got a go-to that can beat you. So, wow, you know.
Yeah, a lot to cover. Let's go ahead. I'm going to start with that Stanford SMU, like you mentioned. You lose Logan Parks, the setter, in the second set, and you mentioned it, Stanford never really bounced back. How about this? SMU, after splitting the first two sets, they hit 467 in the third, 520 in the fourth. Mick, there were just two combined attack errors in the final two sets for SMU. Tremendous effort. Malaya Jones, 24 kills, just 4 errors. And overall, when on Yanwu, and then you added Madison Shear, who had 12 kills, you mentioned just 1 error for SMU. The replacement setter was Taylor Yu, and she played fine, but it just didn't feel like the chemistry was there. I wasn't able to catch that one. But when it came to that pit match, deep into the depths of the overnight session, and Pittsburgh dominates the fourth set, that felt like an NCAA tournament atmosphere when I watched the highlights over, and Bree Kelly had that errorless 10-0-12 performance. I think I wanted a little bit more in the box score from Babcock, but maybe we're just being uh, cologne pilled for Flor Marie Heredia, who once again set a new Miami program record with her 43 kills, as Louisville with 24 from Peyton Peterson reverse swept Miami on Sunday. Gosh, so much fun. I get to see Louisville, Mick, on Sunday on ACC Network against Clemson, 1 o'clock Eastern. If you want to kind of check me out, I was able to make my national debut on Wednesday this past week. Georgia Tech swept Clemson. It was a lot of fun. I'm excited to check out this Louisville team and see what Dan's got cooking.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing to think about. Stanford was 4 points down in the fifth set against Pitt, and they could have come out of this weekend 0-2. Not for Elliot Rubin, I believe, served 6 straight balls at the end of that set, that fifth set, and Stanford won. But Stanford coming out of there 0-2, what would that have done to them?
It would have put them right on the bubble of hosting. I had them right around 12 in my top 16. Now I've catapulted them back firmly into the top 10. But as you mentioned, I've got SMU at 6. I've got Stanford at 8, Louisville at 9, Miami at 12, and Pitt up at 5. Now, that's the question. Can Pitt earn the top 4? And I think they have to beat Louisville to finish the year, in my eyes, to get them that top 4. I think Arizona State right now is playing at tip-top form, and they are considered a top 4 team And then you talk about geography and the West Coast aspect. And I think that favors in as well for the Sun Devils, who had a big 5-set win over Colorado. Mick, I want to show everyone the rest of the top 25. So as we do that now, we can kind of fill in the rest of the pieces with Arizona State at 9, Wisconsin at 10. The real question comes, how close are the coaches to getting these final few hosts right? Because I really think they've got the top 15 correct. And then it's one spot for USC, Indiana, who takes on Nebraska this weekend, Tennessee, who could play their way in the SEC tournament maybe, and then Minnesota. I don't really think anyone outside the top 19 could be playing into that hosting position unless someone like TCU or Colorado finishes really strong, but TCU just dropped 2 straight. And then somehow Penn State and BYU stay ranked.
Yeah, that's hard when BYU's 10th, Penn State's that far down in their conference. But here's what's going to happen. Two things. The RPI is going to dictate for the committee, and maybe they say it doesn't, but it characteristically always has been pretty darn close. RPI and the KPI, if you look at them. So some of those teams that are down in their conference are still going to have a chance to get in, even though they didn't do well in their conference.
Right.
The second thing, though, is all the SEC teams have an advantage. And the reason they have an advantage is they're playing a tournament with all 16 teams in the tournament. That means their RPIs are going to go up because as they progress in the tournament, let's say they're on the bubble, they progress in the tournament, their RPIs are going to improve even if they lose and they get into the semifinals or the finals because they're playing higher RPI teams, and that's going to raise their RPI.
Yeah.
If you want to get in, let's say you're on the bubble and you have a hot weekend and you can win 3 matches in that 5-day tournament, you're going to put yourself in a position to get in the tournament. So SEC has figured out having a tournament is to their advantage. In football, they're all arguing about this because in football, they think the teams that play the championship matches at the end of their conference get an advantage in getting in because they get seen or one more chance to get seen and position themselves. So this is something that's going to come up in the future, and the Big Ten and the ACC and the Big 12 are going to have to think twice now about not doing this. Plus, ESPN loves it that they're playing because they want the matches. They want to get them on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's going to be advantageous to a team like Tennessee. But on the other side, it may hurt a Texas. If they go out and drop a stinker in the quarterfinals, they might drop out of the top 4. And so
How
that's
do you see that though? They won't play until the third
Sunday.
day.
They'll play
Yeah,
Sunday.
they won't play until the third day. The most they could lose is a top 10 ranking. So if they lose to a top 10 team, their RPI will only drop 1 spot. That won't knock them out of the top 4.
Well, I don't know about a top 10. Like let me take a gander at this bracket
So
here.
so I've got it worked out here.
Yeah.
Aren't they scheduled to play? You
So let's say
said
they lose to LSU.
they don't play LSU.
Yeah,
They
they'll play the winner of either LSU or Ole Miss versus Missouri. I'm looking at it right here.
Okay, I had them down playing Georgia. Uh,
No,
but
that'll be A&M's the 2 seed. They'll play the winner of either Georgia or Mississippi
so
State.
there's only one chance. It doesn't matter.
That's
Missouri
what I
is the
mean.
only team they should worry about. Of those 3 you mentioned, Missouri comes through. That means Missouri would be playing the third match in 3 days.
Second match. Second match. So
But
Missouri has a bye.
oh, they have a bye. Okay, so
Yep.
that'd be
And
Missouri's second match. That's a reason to worry because when you don't play and you
getting
play
hot.
somebody that's already played, they got the jitters out and they're ready to go.
I'm just
And
going to
so
say, watch out for Journey Robinson. This is a tournament built for a player like her. She gets 30 kills consistently for LSU, just had another 30 kill performance this weekend. That's the kind of thing in the bright lights. Those are the ones that's all I'm saying as a devil's
but
advocate.
that's the only chance for them to lose out
Yeah.
because if they win there, they're going to play A&M most likely, and
Yeah.
A&M's ranked in
Oh,
the
it'll be
top
great for
6
them.
or 7, so they could lose to A&M and still retain. In fact, they'll gain RPI points for playing a top 10 team.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and flip it on you. Can A&M play their way into a top 4 spot in the NCAA tournament if they
If they
win?
win,
If they win at all? Yeah.
if they win the SEC, they sure can because then you could see how many. that would put a lot of heat on Pitt, especially if Pitt loses.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
To
puts a lot
Louisville.
of heat. Pitt loses to Louisville, A&M moves in. You've got Texas, A&M, Nebraska, and
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Yeah, and then the SEC is saying, "Oh, good, we're going to have at least one team in the Final Four here."
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. RPI wise, for those wondering, you can go ahead and look it up, ncaaStats.figstats.net. Find the active unofficial RPI, where right now UTEP and Indiana are 15-16. I don't quite see either of those teams hosting unless Indiana gets a big win over Nebraska here at the end of the year. The Hoosiers are in a good spot, but they also will travel to Purdue on the last week of the season. So I think you've got to win one of those two if you're Indiana. I think the committee is waiting for someone to pick up a big win, whether it's Minnesota, Indiana, or insert name, right? Like I'm not quite sure who that last. I really feel like it's between those two as the last team. I don't know if USC, we talked about the lack of their finish to the year. I don't know if that's going to be enough because their RPI is at 20, Minnesota's is 14, Indiana's is 16. So that'll be really fun to see.
Let me throw in one other thing for the committee. One of the things that might work well for USC is they don't have any West Coast hosting schools.
Bingo.
And that would make USC a West Coast
Well,
hosting.
Arizona State would be the closest. Yeah.
Well, yes, but they need more than one. I mean, they've got 64 teams, they've got 16 sites. They
Yeah.
usually need to have them spread out enough that they don't have to fly people three time zones or two time zones across the country to play.
Yeah.
It also helps them with expenses. So that's just another throw in another factor.
Yeah, and USC, it doesn't have a bad resume. They're 7-6 against the top 50. And, the non-con play helped because they swept Creighton. And so right now, Creighton is lifting up USC's RPI because Creighton has an
Absolutely.
RPI of 6 or 7. And then USC with the win at Wisconsin and the win against Minnesota, that's where, I'm not quite sure, if there's any real bad losses. Their worst loss is that sweep at UCLA. And you
I,
can kind of discredit that.
yeah, I don't think they have a win at Wisconsin, though. I think they have a loss at Wisconsin,
They
don't
have a
they?
win. I'm looking at it right now. They 1-4 at Wisconsin on October 19th.
Okay. Okay. I'm wrong. You're right. That is
Yeah,
correct. And that's a big deal. And
big
that's
deal.
a big deal right now because Wisconsin's going to be good here at the end of the season. And I just think they're the dark horse. You've got to watch out for Wisconsin. I think they're going to play.
Creighton won their 12th straight Big East regular season. They have 46 straight Big East wins. You can pencil them in. I don't think they're going to have any worries. Meanwhile, how about Moritz, who suited up for Pitt? That's going to be a big storyline moving into the end of the year. And Mick, we had our highest scoring set of the season as Northern Arizona beat Idaho State 44-42 in a set this weekend. NAU, we got to give them some credit. They finished an unbeaten Big Sky season. Hofstra finished a legacy year as well. And as we ramp up, starting on Tuesday, wall-to-wall coverage on ESPN Plus. You get into Wednesday and you start getting those midday matches in the tournaments, and then Thursday, starting at 10 a.m., the ASUN volleyball tournament kicks off. You got the MEAC and the WAC and all these tournaments that you can just sit back and enjoy volleyball middle of the day. Remember, it's not too late to go order. It's not cheap, but the Apple TV streaming service allows you to multi-view. I think ESPN is starting to do it on other Roku and Amazon now, but that was kind of the OG for Mick and I. And then Friday at noon, the SEC tournament kicks off. And Mick, I want to make a quick apology. I misspoke last week when we were talking about the Player of the Year semifinalists, and I got an earful from a listener who also happens to be Purdue's head coach, who was like, Kenna Woolard, what do you mean she doesn't deserve to be in this spot? She's second in the Big Ten. And he was right. I was talking about Elia Rubin with her 3 kills per set, and I said Woolard by accident. Woolard certainly, earning that semifinalist nod. She's second in the conference with nearly 5 kills a set. So I was speaking about Rubin with the numbers being low for a semifinalist. 3 kills a set doesn't quite qualify in my eyes.
Yeah, and speaking of Ruben, that's the one player that needed to step up in this match this weekend.
SMU, yeah.
Yeah, and seem to have trouble doing that again, and that's kind of been her MO. When she gets hot, she is hard to stop, my goodness. But getting her into that zone, I thought the middle blockers for SMU really put her on the defensive, and then she struggled a bit. So constantly have to go back and refocus and see what she can come back with. But it might have just been the setting also.
That's a good point, and I think you could write that off, and hopefully Parks will be all right. One other awesome scoreline, Baylor beat Houston in 4 sets, and the fourth set was 35-33.
Oh,
And so
Houston.
that's wow. We'll talk a little bit more about Baylor. They've got a player on my team of the week. But any other big storylines from this last week? Alana Clemente had that huge match at Purdue with 30 points and she hit over 340. The freshman, maybe freshman of the year in the Big Ten Conference, starting to kind of ramp into that conversation as Oregon is getting a little bit more and more coverage. Pittsburgh, they dropped the first set against Cal on Sunday. That was a bit surprising. Beat them in four. I don't know. I'm a little worried about Pitt down the stretch, and Moritz is obviously going to be a big factor into that.
I might be more worried about Texas. If you look at the box score, and I watched Texas play South Carolina, and incidentally, South Carolina represented at a very high level. They were really fun to watch, but only Stafford could get the ball down on the floor for Texas. They went everywhere they could, and nothing worked except Stafford, and she had 20 some kills to lead that 3-1 win over South Carolina, but South Carolina, the right side for South Carolina had like 10 kills and 20 swings with no errors. That means going at Texas's left sides, and so I'm a little bit concerned if Texas is on the upswing or just holding on going into this tournament. They've got to find a way to score points.
I think this tournament is going to be very good for Texas because even if they lose, let's say in the semifinals, this will be a big game atmosphere. You finish the year in the SEC, sometimes you're going to play against like Mississippi State and like you said, Southern Carolina, something like that, obviously South Carolina, but it doesn't get your juices flowing and then all of a sudden you ramp into the NCAA tournament. This will give them an opportunity. They're treating this tournament in a really big way, the SEC, and it's all going to be covered by the top broadcasters for ESPN and everything, carpet rolled out in Savannah, Georgia. So I think that'll be good to kind of get Texas into a groove, and I think Kentucky is in a groove already. But I talked about Pitt. They'll finish their years Syracuse and Boston College, and then they get that Louisville one. So hopefully Moritz is back for Louisville. They finish at Georgia Tech, who is an explosive team filled with freshmen. And I'm excited to see how the end of the year works for the ACC because a lot of it is up in the air. But for this week, Purdue, Wisconsin on Wednesday should be really fun. And then North Carolina, Miami are my two big matches to watch for this upcoming week, Mick. And it's time to get to our six rotations team of the week. As always, you can email us at sixrotations@gmail.com. Try to win a shirt, maybe a jacket, quarter zip, sweater, whatever it is. And I'm going to start things off. You mentioned her, Torrey Stafford, 32 kills, hitting over 400 in that reverse sweep against Auburn, and then a big match against South Carolina as well.
Yeah, and I have Stafford as one of my outsides that I picked this week because I thought she had 25 kills, 49 swings against South Carolina, and like I said, she was the only one in double figures there for Texas, and if she hadn't gone off, I don't think Texas would have handled that. My other outside. And I want to give honorable mention to Sophie Gregorio of Pitt for 29 swings, 20 kills, and no errors. But I picked Peyton Peterson, Louisville, because I thought she was the one stabilizing factor that they counted on that got them back in that match and allowed them to win. So those are my two left sides, Stafford and Peterson.
All right, I went with Anna Barilovich for Colorado. She had 24 kills in the win over TCU, 28 kills with five aces in that 5-set loss against Arizona State. I'm telling you, do not be surprised in early December when Colorado comes to a team in that first round and comes out of the first weekend. I really think the Buffaloes are primed for a postseason run. And then I doubled up in the middle, Mick. I went all big red. Andy Jackson, 15 errorless kills against UCLA. Rebecca Allick had 13 kills, 7 blocks against UCLA. And then they doubled down, went 8 and 9 kills with just 1 error against USC.
Yeah, I liked Alec too, and I think she's underappreciated only because her counterpart Jackson gets an awful lot of attention and well deserved. But I picked Alec. I also picked a Texas middle, Aiden Ames, who is really coming on. She was 7 for 13. They don't set her very much yet, but I thought her blocking was exceptional. She didn't get stuffs, but she's the reason that they controlled the net. And so those were the two middles I could have picked. I could have picked several other middles, including Jackson, but I could pick her every week. I thought I'd just spread the love a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to finally give them their full due. I've been rotating around. I thought Kara Cressy had a tremendous match in
Presley
that
was
reverse
good.
sweep over Miami and wanted to give that credit. Over on the right side, this was impossible. I really, it's hard to not give it to Flor Marie Heredia Colon, who had 75 kills in 2 matches. But I watched a little bit of that Arizona State Colorado match, and I wanted to give it to Naomi Glover. 31 kills. She hit over 400. And Arizona State is going to have to be driven by the Glover train in order to go on a run this year. And I like her.
Same as SMU is going to have to be driven by the Jones train. And I went with
Yep.
Malaya Jones because I'll tell you, every time they needed a big kill in that big match with Stanford this weekend, Jones showed up. But she was deft at placing the ball and hitting soft shots as well as bouncing balls when she had a chance. And her blocking was amazingly physical. So I really starting to like Jones even more than I did before, and I wouldn't argue with Glover at all. I kind of thought Glover was really bouncing balls. That was kind of fun to see her bouncing balls this weekend. So I think we have 5 or 6 opposites in the country right now that are just fun to watch. And boy, I don't know how you're going to pick them out, but I want all of them to get invitations to the USA tryouts.
Yeah, it's a great point. Jones with 24 kills, 9 digs, 3 blocks in that win over Stanford. What about Setter, Mick? Where are you going, Setter?
I went with Avery Carlson. I haven't had her all year. I just thought she was so stable. She didn't show hardly any emotion. She kept her people focused. But what she did more than anything is her choices were so good. And a lot of times we don't have any way to evaluate choices. And I just watched, and she was getting her hitters like Rogers. She was getting Rogers in position to score. Knew when to go to Maya Jones on broken plays. She was real good. So I went with Carlson. That's the first time I've had her this year, but I thought she really was great. I had 55 assists, 56 assists in that match with Stanford.
I also went with a Texan with someone that we hadn't picked yet, and it was a former team of Avery Carlson. I went with Harley Kreck, the sophomore for Baylor. She had 43 assists, but 21 digs in that win over Houston. And I just wanted to give her a little bit of love here because if Baylor is going to make a run, I think we're going to have to, start to see some Haley Kreck action and see what Baylor can do because we talked a little bit too much negatively about teams like BYU and Baylor. They're still going to make the tournament. So at the end of the day, they can make us look pretty silly in December. We're going to see how the bottom of that Big 12 does. And then I stuck with the Big 12 for my libero. Second time this year, I'm picking Rachel Van Gorp out of Iowa State, who had 22 digs and a kill in the win over TCU. Undefeated at home, Mick. Iowa State. How about that?
Yeah, yeah, I think they're doing pretty good. They always play well at home though, and that crowd really supports them well there. I had a repeat actually for my libero this year, and I got to see her firsthand. Victoria Harris from University of South Carolina. She had 19 digs against Texas, but she is one of the most fun electric players in the country to watch. Just a little bit of a thing and all over the court. You hit at her and she just brings that ball right up on the spot and she really drives that team. Now, they haven't been all that successful this year, but boy, they're fun to watch and they're going to be good if they can keep their athletes together.
And maybe they'll get an NIVC invite. You never know. The word on the street is the NIVC is coming back. starting on December 4th. And there may not be more than 16 or 20 teams this year. They want to limit the field and try to make it so every round gets a little bit more exciting. And so I'm curious to see maybe a team like South Carolina, maybe a team like Clemson, Georgia Tech, if they don't make it into the NCAA field, they won it a couple of years ago. But Mick, how about this? I ran into a fan after the Georgia Tech Clemson match. He came up to me with his wife. He said, I don't want to interrupt you. I was walking out to my car. He said, we are huge fans of your show. And the wife said, every single week, my husband looks on Monday afternoon or evening, waits for the update to come that the episode is out, and then she leaves him alone for a half an hour. And guess what? I told him to submit a team, and he said, I don't really watch anyone besides Georgia Tech. Mick, I told him to submit a team, and guess what? Terrell, you won this week with Glover, Carlson, Jackson, and Stafford. 4 correct picks. Also had some good ones with Cressy and Cologne.
Yeah.
So, enjoy your gear. Congratulations. I'm not going to send him an email to spoil it. I'll let him watch it here. And then you can email me, Terrell, when you see that, see it right here. So congratulations. Just a great moment. Hopefully, you and your wife enjoy the finish to the year. Maybe Georgia Tech goes on a run for you guys. They do face Stanford, Pitt, and Louisville. So the Yellow Jackets, with one of those wins, could jump into the top 40 in the RPI.
I think what that does for them in the RPI, even if they lose, they're going to move up in the RPI almost 10 spots just on playing those 3 teams alone.
Yeah.
So I'd look for Georgia Tech to have a chance to get in the tournament.
They got to 40 with 2 wins over Clemson this past week. So if they keep on creeping up,
they'll be in the 30s. Even if they lose, they'll be in the 30s, and they're going to be all right. They're in.
yeah, excited to see that Louisville Georgia Tech match this upcoming Friday. And then I am on ACC Network Sunday at 1 o'clock. One more shameless plug. As we wrap things up, he's Mick, I'm Daniel, and this is Six Rotations.